Let's face it, Americans speak fast. Doesn't mean we can't. On this video, I'm going to share with you two very important sounds that most people get wrong. And it's going to help speed up your American English, but be understood. Hey there, I'm Gabriel from GV Voice Academy, your accent reduction instructor to help you get that much closer to mastering the American accent. If you haven't yet, subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can get access to all of my practice videos. Also check out my 5-star best-selling accent reduction course. I left a link below, as well as my other communication courses to help you effectively communicate with confidence, articulation, and grace. Now, there are two particular sounds I want to focus on in this video. The first one is a bit easier, but the second one is a little more complicated, but I have the answer for you. So I need you to stick around with me throughout this video. You hear this sound in a lot of reduction words, but there are two major mistakes people do when trying to pronounce the ending of this reduction. For example, let's look at this first word here. Isn't. Now let's examine the ending of that word to make sure that we're doing it perfectly. Because you have to understand, American accent training is like walking a tightrope. If you miss one sound, enunciate one little thing a little too much, people are automatically going to know that you're not a native, and they're going to start doing the typical accent discrimination. Where are you from? I love your accent. Oh, it sounds so exotic. We don't want that. So for this ending of this word, it's basically a very light N. Let me hear a light N. And you notice it's internal. It's in here. Versus forward, loud. But at the same time, it's not back here. Imagine this is the front of your teeth. This is your tongue. Rest it right above there, part of your upper jaw. Nice and light. Now, from there, I want you to lightly touch that T. And I mean lightly. A lot of people have a tendency of hitting that T too hard. That's a dead giveaway. It's like we're hitting that N and tapping that T. Let's back off in that T even more. Even more. Do you hear that? Versus isn't too much. See how that sounds when I put that tongue too back? Isn't too much. Tongue forward and touching the top of the roof of your mouth. Isn't. Barely audible, that T. Let's put that in a sentence. She isn't going to the party. Now, do you hear a T at all in that word? No. These are the little tricks I want to teach you. She isn't going to the party. That T is pretty much non-existent. And see how nice and forward that N is? She isn't going to the party. Versus she isn't relaxed. She isn't going to the party. Now let that flow a little more. She isn't going to the party. Do you see how I'm able to have a little more fluidity and speed with that word? Well, that's the key. There are a whole bunch, and I cover this a lot in this channel, of these shortcuts you could take that allow us to speed through a little bit, sound a little more faster, more efficient, without those roadblocks, bumps in the road that prevent you from flowing. Isn't. That stops it. Isn't. Excellent. Now here's another word. Doesn't. Again, doesn't. It's like I don't even do the T. I just basically stop on that N. Doesn't. Yeah, hear that? Let's hear that in a sentence. It doesn't look like he'll be back in time. So in this version, I had to slow it down because I wanted you to hear what we're eventually going to speed up. It doesn't look like he'll be back in time. Now let's see if we could link that a little more together without the pause. It doesn't look like he'll be back in time. Doesn't look. Doesn't lo, lo. We're going from that right into the lo. We can't possibly do that smoothly with that T. It doesn't look. Not possible. One more time in real time. Throw it away. It doesn't look like he'll be back in time. Excellent. Couple more. And then we're going to get to that harder reduction ending I was telling you about. So stick around. Hasn't. Same thing. Very light. Barely audible T. Let's put that in a sentence. He hasn't had time to finish. He hasn't had time to finish. Now let's see if we can link that in there without the pause. He hasn't had time to finish. So this is like a moving train. When Americans talk, everything is linked together, and it doesn't stop until it's an ending of a sentence, thought, phrase. This train is linked and moving forward and doesn't stop. Excellent. Next one. Mustn't. mustn't. Let's put that in a sentence. You mustn't forget to finish the report. You mustn't forget to finish the report. The reason why I'm pausing is so you could see that just before we jump on to the next phrase, the next moving train cart. Let's smooth that out. You mustn't forget to finish the report. See how easier it is to jump from one train cart to the next? Good job. Now stick around, because when I'm done with these two difficult sounds, we're going to throw all these reductions into sentence structures to see if your brain can retain what we've learned. Because remember, like in all my practice videos, we have to put this stuff into practice or it won't stick. Now we move on to the next tricky sound that throws a lot of people off, to the DNT sound. This is a bit more challenging. It's like what we did earlier, the n sound, right? But think of it, there's like a silent G before we get to that N. Listen carefully. It's kind of like I'm doing a G sound, G, like a G sound, but with my mouth closed, and not letting that vowel sound come out, like it's trapped in here. That is essentially the DNT sound, without the T, of course, like we talked about. For example, in words like shouldn't, I'm over-exaggerating it. It's a little softer than that, but I wanted you to really hear that swallowed G sound. Ga, 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 One more time. Shouldn't. Good. Let's relax that a bit. Shouldn't. It's ever so slight, isn't it? Versus shouldn't. There is no vowel. That vowel is gone. That T, barely audible. Now let's put that word in a sentence. He shouldn't, right? He shouldn't have to pay for anything. He shouldn't have to pay for anything. Do you hear that? These are the little micro things that action reduction instructors don't teach you. A lot of them say, repeat after me. Well, that's not good enough. We need to dive in and look into the mechanics of what's working in there to create that sound and repeat it over and over and over again until it becomes muscle memory. Let's look at another word. Wouldn't. There's that dn again, right? Wouldn't, no T. Let's put that in a sentence. I wouldn't be surprised, right? A little more in real time. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. You see, now we have the ability to be able to really speed that up and sound authentic without any bumps in the road to stop that fluidity, to stop that train from moving. Let's look at another word. Hadn't. Hadn't. I hadn't thought of that. I'm hesitating just so you could hear that dn sound. I hadn't thought of that. A little more in real time. I hadn't thought of that. A little more in real time. I hadn't thought of that. See that? Smooth. Next one. Couldn't. Couldn't. I couldn't care less. A little more in real time. I couldn't care less. More in real time. I couldn't care less. Now we're getting into the real American accent authentic territory, right? Good job. Now, let's mix this up. Everything we've learned so far, I'm going to throw into a sentence. I want to see if you can remember what those reduction endings sound like. Here's your first sentence. Take a crack at it. Doesn't it make sense to finish this tomorrow? I couldn't agree with you more. See the difference from doesn't, couldn't, a little more in real time. Doesn't it make sense to finish this tomorrow? Couldn't agree with you more. A little more in real time. Doesn't it make sense to finish this tomorrow? Couldn't agree with you more. If you were to slow me down, you could hear all those nuances. Next one, you're doing great, stick around. I wouldn't drive that car if I were you. He hasn't had time to fix it. You hear that? Couldn't, hasn't. A little more in real time. I wouldn't drive that car if I were you. He hasn't had time to fix it yet. A little more in real time. I wouldn't drive that car if I were you. He hasn't had time to fix it yet. It is possible to speak faster because I know when we are learning the American accent, we have to start slow. We can't possibly jump right into 100 miles an hour until we learn how to do it at 3 miles an hour. But these are the little tricks, the little nuances that we could do along the way through these videos on my YouTube channel to help your journey in sounding smoother, paced, and articulate, getting you that much closer to mastering the American accent.